Okay, so hey everyone, putting together these little videos here to help you, to try to help you prepare for the test. Also, to help provide those who are out sick, miss a day of school for one reason or another, to provide them with any information they may have missed in class from one of our class lectures or discussions. So, I'm going to try to do this in a quick, abbreviated form. I know I can't cover all of this unit within 10 or 15 minutes, so I'm probably going to limit these videos to about 10 minutes, give or take a little bit, and we'll just end where it ends, and then pick up with the second video wherever that happens to be. So let's go ahead and get started. When we started this unit, we started with some things already in place, coming out of our unit on the road to the Civil War. First off, we had the election of President Lincoln in November of 1860. With his election, we almost immediately, in December of 1860, see the secession of South Carolina. Within a couple of months, South Carolina's secession will be followed by the secessions of Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas. And this is all happening still within the year 1860. Keep in mind, Lincoln will not be inaugurated. He won't take the reins of power until March of 1861. In February of 1861, the Confederate States of America, the CSA, is formed. They'll immediately elect Jefferson Davis as their first president. So Jefferson Davis becomes president of the CSA in February 1861, really a full month before Lincoln will take the reins of power in the Union, in the United States. March 1861, we have the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. April 12th of 1861, we'll have the first shots of the Civil War fired on Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter sits in South Carolina's Charleston Harbor. The commander leading the forces of South Carolina, the South Carolina militia, in firing on Fort Sumter is a gentleman by the name of P.G.T. Beauregard. He'll be with us for quite some time. It's a name that will continue to pop up. April 17th, after the fall of Fort Sumter, eventually the Confederate States, South Carolina forces will occupy the fort. On April 17th, we'll see the secession of Virginia. With Virginia, we'll see the rapid secession of Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, which brings the Confederate States to 11. And that's where it will remain for the remainder of the war. In those 11 states, we have a population of 9 million, give or take, 4 million of which are enslaved African Americans. So that gives you a kind of a picture of what that side of the war is going to look like. Compare that with those states that stay with the Union, including the slave border states of Maryland, Vermont, Kentucky, and Missouri, and we have a total of 21 states with a population of 20 million. So right off the bat, we have a what looks to be a pretty unfair fight. Okay, lots of the advantages, both in size and population, and then add to that things like industrial production, an established military in place, an established navy in place, and it seems like going into the war, the Union is going to have some pretty significant advantages. The South, for its part, will have some advantages as well. Chief among those will be quality generalship. Most of the leaders that stay and rise to positions of power within the Confederate Army will be some of the best military minds that the United States had prior to the country splitting apart. Eventually, chief among them will be Robert E. Lee, a name that we recognize. All right, so this is what the map looks like. I just kind of went through that for you. You kind of see there the states in green, that kind of greenish color, the border states, and you quickly understand why those states are so important to the Union. Look over to the east, and we've got Maryland, which if Maryland goes, then we've got Washington, D.C. really isolated on an island between two slave Confederate states. But that doesn't happen. Maryland stays with the Union. It'll be a kind of an uneasy relationship for the remainder of the war. Maryland will be kind of a thorn in the side of the Lincoln administration for quite some time. Missouri, extremely important because we've got the Mississippi River, which becomes an important strategic point during the war. Same thing with Kentucky. So the geography of the United States plays a really big part here, and holding on to those border states was really a big deal for the Lincoln administration. So going into the war, who's calling the shots? Well, of course we have the president, but the kind of the chief military officer at the Capitol in Washington D.C. is a gentleman by the name of General Winfield Scott, probably the best, most highly regarded military officer of the period, was the hero of the Mexican War, but he's advanced in age, not really suited to be leading troops in the field anymore. And but he is drawing up some of the strategy. He'll come up with some of the plans here that we'll move forward with in this war. His initial plan, his grand strategy for the war, comes to be known as the Anaconda Plan. And just a quick layout of what that looked like, or what that was to look like, would be a blockade of all the saltwater seaports in the South, a capture of and control of the Mississippi River, therefore essentially starving the South of needed supplies, needed resources, but also preventing the export of the South's chief product, which is cotton, the lifeblood of the South. Lincoln will reject this as a grand strategy. However, it's important for us because over the course of the war, we'll see elements of that strategy, the blockading of the South, and an ongoing effort to capture and gain control of the Mississippi River become really integral parts of Union strategy. But Lincoln, Scott sees this as an opportunity to win the war without shedding blood. Lincoln doesn't want to wait for that to happen slowly. He sees the need to launch a military campaign to try to bring a quick military end, to the conflict. So where will that first conflict happen? At a little place called Manassas Junction, about 20 miles south of the U.S. Capitol at Washington, D.C. We'll have a Union Army of approximately 35,000 soldiers under the command of General Irvin McDowell. We will have what eventually, during the day of July 21st, will be 30,000 rebel soldiers under the command of P.G.T. Beauregard. Going into the day, it won't be nearly that many for the South. We still have about a third of the forces that have yet to reach the battlefield. They'll reach the battlefield later in the day, and it will really help secure the outcome of the war for the South. As it was for most of the day on July 21st, things were going the Union way. The Union lines are pounding into the Confederate lines, pushing them back at every point. There's one point in the middle of the line with a unit of Virginian soldiers under the command of Thomas Jackson. They'll be holding the line. They won't give ground. Their example will be used as an inspiration for officers in other parts of the field. One of them, who is reputedly says, "Look at the Virginians and Jackson standing like a stone wall." And then, of course, out of that we get Stonewall Jackson, which will be one of the leading military minds up until his death at Chancellorsville later in the war for the Southern Army. When those additional troops show up on the scene, those additional rebel troops show up on the scene, it's going to really tilt the balance in favor of the Confederacy. At the end of the day, the Union soldiers will be sent scurrying back to the Capitol in really a disastrous defeat for the Union and for Lincoln in this first battle of the Civil War. We have a total of about 5,000, just almost 5,000 casualties. But the big lesson coming out of the war for both sides is this is not going to be a short war. Lincoln, he's enlisting guys for 90-day enlistments. He thinks this is going to be a short war. The South, they feel like they're fighting for a cause, while the northern soldiers are fighting for a cause that's not so close to their heart. That northern soldiers won't have the stomach to stick with this war. Both sides are wrong, and most of them realize it here on this first battle of the war. All right, so what happens after the first Battle of Bull Run? Well, right off the bat, Irvin McDowell is going to be sacked. He'll be replaced by General George B. McClellan. McClellan's going to be a guy that will be with us for a while, at least through Antietam, and then even on through the election of 1864. But he'll take command of the Army of the Potomac following the first Battle of Bull Run, oftentimes by Southerners called Manassas, First Manassas. As I've said in class, oftentimes Southerners will name their battles after the town or city by which the battle takes place. The North, on the other hand, will often name their battles after geographic features such as streams, rivers, and so that's why we have the discrepancy in names. But we talked about that in class, and we won't take it any further right here. Another thing we see here in the aftermath of Bull Run, and a problem that Lincoln will deal with for most of the war, is the problem of Britain. Britain is starving for Southern cotton, and so when Union naval vessels blockade Southern ports, that's going to shut the faucet off for Britain and for British factories who need that cotton. About 75 to 90%, somewhere in there, of cotton making it to Britain prior to the war comes out of the southern United States. So you can see why this is a really important problem for Great Britain. Will Great Britain set aside its opposition to slavery and intervene in the war on the side of the South in order to turn that faucet back on? That'll be something that remains to be seen. But we see it pop up early in the war with something called the Trent Affair. A British merchant ship named the Trent is traveling out of a Confederate port when it's stopped by a U.S. naval vessel. Upon boarding the vessel, U.S. naval officers find two Confederate officials who are sailing back to Britain to try to negotiate British help for the South. Those officials will be arrested, and a controversy will ensue. The Brits back home in London will begin to demand the release of those soldiers in an illegal, for what they see as an illegal boarding of a ship flying under a British flag. Lincoln won't push the issue, as he's quoted as saying, "One war at a time is all we can deal with," and so those disaster is averted, at least for the first time here early in the war, by the release of those soldiers and a bit of compromise from the Lincoln administration.